Spirit-filled believers are given to godly responses like Noah. And as we go, I'm going to start in verse 10. Look at chapter 6, verse 10. As we go through these verses, I want you to ask yourself, are you living at the capacity that God is offering you? God is offering. His grace is able to do the same thing that we see in Noah's life. We're not living in the darkest time in human history. Now it's coming. There is going to be a darker time than the pre-flood world. And that's what the tribulation is going to be like. It's going to be the darkest time in history. But we're not there yet. And so we're not yet as surrounded by evil as Noah was. And God's grace was sufficient for Noah, for us, as it will be to the end. But starting in verse 10, what are the results of God's grace in our lives? We're each given the power to say yes to God. Noah was able to hear what God asked for and say yes and obey God. And that is what grace can do for us. In verse 10, we can choose to live a godly life in the most ungodly and wicked of settings. See what it says in verse 10? Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And look at the world these 3 sons were born into. Verse 11, the earth also was corrupt. That means rotten. It says that the whole earth was like that refrigerator. It was corrupt before God. And the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Wow. And Noah's raising 3 boys in a culture that bad, that's rotten. I mean, have you ever felt like you're struggling? I mean, you love the Lord, but you've got to let your children loose into this world that is rotten. Hey, it's not new. And it's not as rotten today as it was back then. And so the first truth, number 1, we can choose to live godly in the most ungodly and wicked settings. And that's why we have to see that Noah lived and raised his family and served the Lord in the most corrupt times there have ever been. So that means it's possible. And it's not how hard Noah tried, it's how powerful God's grace is. All you have to do is try it out. Try it out when you're facing the worst of times. Ask God to empower and strengthen you to say no to sin. It's one of the greatest evidences of salvation. Because our God is able to make all grace abound toward us in every way so that we can accomplish His purpose.